Okay, so I'll briefly talk about the wrap. So the wrap is a reflective account of professional practice. You're making claims of competence in various areas of professional practice. How are you supporting these claims with evidence? So it's highlighting what you do, why you do it, and also evidence to support how you do it. So this is directly from the handbook. The practitioner reflects on, makes explicit, and provides a convincing case for how their experience and expertise meets the target TEEP role descriptor and how the evidence shows this. Okay, so we're clearly linking how your competency with a descriptor, why you are doing it, and then a clear link to the evidence and how it supports this. So some key features of the wrap. So we have often begin with an explicit claim of competence. Okay, so what you do within your EAP practice. A sound argument why, which is often perhaps this is an area that we see applicants fail to discuss why they do something in the classroom or why they do something within their practice. A clear link to the competencies, and we'll have a look at some examples here. Very important that you make a clear link to a specific competency, and that competency is evidenced clearly as well. So the two are linked together. Explanation of the validity of the evidence. So how does the evidence support the competency that you are looking at? And interestingly, yeah, so hyperlink to evidence. It's suggested you use Padlet. However, any shared drive can also work. Google Drives, Microsoft OneNote. Just be a little bit careful. We've seen recently with some shared drives, access issues. So Padlet is usually very easy. You can flick between the evidence. The assessor can go through all the evidence. They can just click through. Sometimes on shared drives, we've seen you click on the evidence and only that specific evidence appears. There's no functionality to go back into the shared drive and go through each individual piece of evidence, because as an assessor, it's quite useful to be able to flick through the evidence and look at the application holistically at the end. So that's quite important. Okay, so hopefully after this activity, things will become a little bit clearer. So we're going to look at 3 excerpts. So there's an excerpt for each level. So we've got an associate fellow, a fellow, and a senior fellow. It's just a small excerpt. The 2 of the excerpts are real applicants that passed, and we've been given permission to use their excerpts. One of the excerpts is not as good, and therefore it's not a real one. It's one that I have created because obviously we wouldn't be allowed to use one that didn't pass. So have a little look and discuss what claims of competency are being discussed and what evidence they could use for each claim. Also consider how this evidence is demonstrating impact. Okay, so think about what impact the evidence is showing. I've removed the criteria, so you could have a little play and see if you could add any of the criteria. However, that's quite a big job, so I don't really expect anyone to do that unless they're very familiar with the criteria. There's 3 excerpts. You might wish to focus on one of them rather than all 3. That's totally fine. So we'll break up into small groups. Carol, did we say maybe probably it's quite a large group, maybe four people in each group?
Yeah. How long?
We're on schedule, I think, so about 15 minutes, and I'll drop in to each group and have a chat as well. I've just popped the the examples into the chat box.
Okay, hold on, yeah.
And I've just dropped the handbook, most recent handbook in as well. And I can see everyone has popped back. Just a few questions that have popped up that I can see. The first one, somebody asked regarding the number of competencies. So Matt asks, what's a good maximum number of competencies to tag for one claim? I guess, I mean, there's no hard and fast rule for this. I'd imagine, yeah, 3 or 4. You don't want to be having more than 4. It just becomes a bit complicated for the assessor to go through and click. But there's no solid rule for it. But yeah, I'd be 3 or 4 would seem appropriate. A second question was, is it better to focus on competencies and then evidence each one rather than make a claim and link in competencies? So yeah, so I would make a claim of what you are doing in the classroom and then link the competencies in after, because you'll find that you should be able to include a number of competencies for that claim. I have seen applicants where they have just focused on each competency and discussed what they did. The only trouble then, it's not really a reflection. It becomes more like a tick box activity. So yeah, definitely make a claim and then link in the competencies and think about why you have done that. Let's have a look. Any more or any problematic criteria that came up through your discussions? Feel free to pop. I can see Tatiana has a hand up.
Hi, Matthew. Yes, Vanessa and I were talking about the struggle to evidence impact. So I told her that I am currently applying for senior lecturer and not for BALEAP exactly. And I'm going through this struggle because, I mean, we know the impact we have on students, but evidencing something that is so subjective. So, for example, I gave her an example of, I'm still writing my claim. So I gave her an example of something I've just done. And my supervisor said that I was on the right track. So I think it's going to work. He said, right. So, for example, I held a workshop for the team of practitioners at my university. And this workshop was about material design. So how can I evidence impact? Yes, I ran a survey. Yes, I ran a poll. Yes, my colleagues came back with wonderful statements about the workshop, but I needed to evidence impact in a more substantial manner. So I found a colleague who was willing to share the PowerPoint presentation he had prepared for one of his modules with me. And that PowerPoint presentation clearly showed that whatever I mentioned in my workshop had been applied. So according to my mentor, that was proof of impact because not only did I have a statement from him saying, yes, her workshop really, impacted my practice, but here's the proof with the slides showing, that whatever I mentioned in my workshop had been applied. So that was an evidence of impact because I shouldn't, as a senior lecturer in the future, I shouldn't only show that I am impacting my students, but I am impacting the practice of the school as a whole. So I told her, look, I told Vanessa, I got one example, but I'm struggling to find more because everything else I've done, and I've done a lot, is hard to evidence like that in such a substantial manner. So this is one thing that Vanessa and I talked about.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I guess so. Obviously, at the senior fellow level, we're looking at impact on students, colleagues, and then, yeah, within the institution. I think you've shown a great example of impact there. You've looked at delivering a CPD session for colleagues and then looked at the impact from that. So, yeah, that's a great example of showing impact that has come from how your CPD session has led into the teaching practices of the teachers that attended that session. Yeah, interestingly, you found that through asking a teacher and looking at how it's fed through, but that could also come through perhaps observation of other teachers, and they're great examples. Thinking back to the example that we looked at today, they were talking about how they have designed a new in-sessional provision across the university. They provided a structure of how that was implemented through CPD sessions, through focusing on student needs from the faculty perspective. And then they described how that has impacted the institution by increasing collaboration. So again, they've shown impact there at the institution level. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. Tatiana mentioned there that she had a mentor, and we would highly recommend a mentor to talk through these criteria. Often when you're completing the BALEAP accreditation, if you're on your own, it is a little bit difficult to discuss through. Any other questions on the criteria? Hi, Colin.
Hello. It's a somewhat kind of nebulous question, but it came up as we were discussing, and it relates to specifically my teaching year round. A little bit different when I'm doing a pre-sessional. It's more focused on EAP, but a lot of what I do outside of summer is very kind of CLIL heavy, and I'm tasked with the very difficult challenge of trying to convey kind of complex content through English to non-native students. And the big issue that I have is massively diverse levels in linguistic ability. So as I was saying, I literally had an A1 student in the same class as a C2 student last semester. So my question is thus, it's to what extent of completeness do we have to demonstrate a competency? Is it acceptable to illustrate that we are, struggling with something, and it's perhaps a work in progress, and also there's no real kind of perfect solution, but we are trying our best. And I'm referring to this idea of trying to convey complex content when the expectation of our students being at least kind of B1 plus, and frequently they're not. To what degree I can say I'm trying my best, but I'm not sure I've actually succeeded in meeting my own expectations, but also the expectations of the institution based on what we set out to achieve. I write my own module handbooks, so perhaps I'm making a rod from my own back, but there's an expectation that we have a certain level achieved.
Okay. What level are you planning to apply for, Colin?
This would be the fellowship.
Fellowship, yeah. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, quite a tricky question. So, I guess you have a degree of autonomy. You're designing your own modules, so you're showing impact at the course level. Regarding CLIL and its implementation, one instance that I have seen perhaps at the associate fellow and the fellow level is providing a clear rationale of why you are taking those approaches. Whether or not, I think you could still evidence how you have met the competencies, but yeah, to what degree that you have met those, I think that can come through within the discussion. And I think that's a valid form of showing how you have met the competencies to some degree based on the rationale for the approach that you've taken.
Right.
Yeah. And as you said, it may only be one or two of the competencies. And when the RAP is being assessed, obviously the assessor will go through and look for each of these competencies. But yes, they're also grading the RAP holistically as a whole of how you approach the teaching of EAP. So yeah, so if I think if you're struggling with one particular criteria and there is evidence for that, and there's some recognition to what extent you're meeting that criteria, I think that's appropriate. Again, have you got a mentor? I think that would be quite useful, perhaps, for this particular context.
I do, but we would be more of the FHEA brand
Okay.
of fellowship. Okay. So I'm not sure if I can get the crossover. I will ask if that's an issue.